Origin, and then Ubisoft has been pushing their Uplay, and I don't really see that taking off. And Activision Blizzard has Battle.net. So I feel like those aren't, like, while those are nice for their own games, they were never created, in my opinion, to rival Steam. That was just their way of like, hey, we don't want to pay Valve all these royalties for us just having their game distributed on their system, so we're just going to create our own. So they just created their own, and it makes sense. Like Blizzard has their own thing going with all their games. It's all connected. It runs, in my opinion, probably the smoothest out of all of them. And then Valve has Steam, and it's a major distribution, and it's gone over well. I have Steam on my PC. I use it almost every day. But I see Epic actually being able to rival Steam. I see them, especially with the indie games, because Steam, it's just overloaded with indie games, and it's not curated very well. A lot of crap just gets through, and they're just now actually going through and actually curating it. And that's the other thing with Steam. They don't actually really police themselves and like their product until there's like a major backlash. They're just now curating and going through their indie game market because there was people taking an advantage of their indie game market and putting up they weren't even video games, and they were selling them and it was a loophole within Steam's marketplace. And then there was the Counter-Strike Go gambling rings that were going on, and they didn't do anything until it became public knowledge. And there was like a huge outcry of like, holy crap, why is this happening? And then they started doing something about it and started cracking down, and so having Epic in there where they're like, hey, here's the established set of rules that we have in place, and it's everything people have been wanting Valve to do with Steam, and it's literally everything that Epic is saying, like, we're going to do this from the jump. And apparently they had Steam Spy, which I don't know if you guys are familiar, but Steam Spy was a website that analyzed Steam's data without having insider information. So like they were working hard on trying to extract data from Steam, and apparently that guy who ran and operated Steam Spy is essentially the one that's been helping Epic come up with their games store. I look forward to seeing what Epic does. I feel like they know what they're doing, especially when it comes to research. They know what they're doing when it comes to marketing, and I feel like they already have quite a few steps up on Steam at this point, especially with everything I've just discussed and went over. But what do you guys think? Do you guys think that Epic can pull it off? Do you think it's a good idea? Do you think that they're trying to become too greedy too fast? Especially with the success of Fortnite, because even like with Minecraft is still extremely popular. A lot of people don't think that it is, but it's really, really, really popular still. And there's still millions of people that play it. It's still making quite a bit of money. It's just there's been the next thing that popped up. So even if the next thing pops up, I still feel like Fortnite's going to be ridiculously successful and still have millions of players. I don't foresee that going away anytime soon. But like I said, what do you guys think? Do you think it's a good idea? Do you think it's not? Do you think Epic should just focus on games? Or do you think this is a good thing in that it's nice to have a healthy competition for Steam? Because healthy competition, it makes the other person want to do better. So maybe this is a good thing. Maybe this will help us get a better Steam in the long run. Who knows? And moving on to movie news, Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, which is the theme park at Disneyland and I believe Disney World. I'll have to double check. But it's estimating that the Millennium Falcon Smuggler's Run will accommodate up to 1,800 riders per hour. The ride will let guests board the Millennium Falcon and take the galaxy's most infamous hunk of junk on a mission controlling the movement, shields, and weapons. 42 guests can experience the ride at a time through 7 pods that seat 6 people each. That works out to a maximum capacity of 28,800 riders a day. That is nuts. My fiance and I went to Six Flags quite a bit when we lived in St. Louis. It's not uncommon for rides to go down, so I'm going to estimate and say a fair amount, about 24,000 riders a day will probably be riding the Millennium Falcon ride, which that's still insane. Like, that's a lot of people riding the Millennium Falcon ride. The Disney Park Site Touring Plans, which analyzes stats and data to calculate daily crowd sizes and wait times, anticipates that the wait time is going to be 6 or more hours on the opening day of Galaxy's Edge at Disneyland. Disney will have to figure something out for the crowd as they anticipate that the theme park will be at capacity by 10 a.m. for the first 90 days it's open. That's nuts. Star Wars Galaxy's Edge opens at Disneyland in summer of 2019. In other Star Wars news, on the Star Wars show, which is on YouTube, it's a fantastic show. They showed Rey's saber with a cracked and broken kyber crystal, which, after watching The Last Jedi, I anticipated she was going to have to create a new lightsaber. But so this definitely means for sure that she will definitely have a new lightsaber in Episode 9. So I don't know. I'm pretty stoked about it because they've changed how the crystals work for lightsabers as opposed to what they call legends now. So the canon, they've changed it based with like the Clone Wars and Star Wars Rebels. That's where they've really elaborated on how the kyber crystals work. So essentially, her kyber crystal's cracked and broken, and so it's not usable now. I don't know. I think it's cool, and it kind of mirrors the original trilogy. If this is how it's going to go down, because Luke in Return of the Jedi, he creates his own new lightsaber. So I think it would be pretty cool for Rey to get her own new lightsaber. I think that'd be pretty rad. Also, speaking of Episode 9, we have less than 400 days until Episode 9. Almost there. I have a couple possible spoilers for The Mandalorian. So if you don't want to hear possible spoilers for The Mandalorian, I guess skip ahead about a minute. So there were some behind the scenes photos that were snagged of The Mandalorian, and there's a scene where Pedro Pascal's character is in a firefight with Death Troopers. And if you don't remember what Death Troopers are, they were the black armored stormtroopers from Rogue One with like the bright green visors and super freaking cool. Like, these guys were badass, but they're going to be in The Mandalorian, and Pedro Pascal's character is going to be in a firefight with them. I'm freaking stoked. Like, I am so beyond stoked for this show. It's unreal. But I think what's cool is that means that there's the possibility that he's going to be, like, one of his bounties could be an Imperial dictator, I guess. I think that's the word. Director. I don't remember. Similar to in Rogue One, because they always protected the people who were important within the Empire. And another possible major spoiler for Episode 9. So there's multiple reports stating that there's a scene where Luke uses his lightsaber. These are, like I said, behind the scenes stuff. So there's a lot of theories going around that either Luke isn't dead, and that during The Last Jedi, he was actually projecting himself with the Force, and so he's actually still alive. And there's another theory that Sam Witwer, the guy who was the voice actor for Darth Maul, and the guy who was the voice actor and the person they modeled him for the character for Starkiller in the Force Unleashed games, he actually put out a theory that if you become a Force ghost, as time goes on, you get stronger and stronger. So in the original trilogy, Obi-Wan, at the end of A New Hope, he was just a voice, and he was only talking to Luke as a voice. And then in Empire, he was kind of just like floating. He's like, you must go to the Dagobah system. And then, at the end, he was kind of like floating, when Luke was leaving Dagobah to go to Cloud City. But then in Return of the Jedi, Obi-Wan was like sitting down on logs. He was interacting. And we see the same thing with Yoda in The Last Jedi. So in The Last Jedi, he actually hits Luke. And then Yoda causes that Force tree to catch fire from lightning. And so, he physically interacted with stuff. So I don't know. I feel like that's a really good theory. And it's one I had never really thought of until I read that. But that's all I have for Star Wars news for movies. There's a little bit more coming later. So here's, I guess, alternate Star Wars. CBS's chief creative officer, David Nevins, revealed that the Picard spin-off series will debut in late 2019. So next year we're getting not one, but 2 Star Trek shows. We're getting the next season of Star Trek Discovery and the untitled Picard spin-off show in late 2019. So I'm doubly excited for that. I was never really huge into Star Trek. Like, I really enjoyed The Next Generation, but there was a live play, I think that's how it would be described, a live play tabletop RPG on Geek and Sundry. It was called Shield of Tomorrow, and the way that the players did their characters, and just like the way Eric did the campaign and the story, it was so freaking good. It was fantastic, and it really it piqued my interest again, I guess you could say, in Star Trek. I went back and rewatched the original show. I watched all of The Next Generation. Right now I'm doing Deep Space Nine, so I'm pretty excited for these 2 new seasons coming out next year. Parrot Analytics revealed that Daredevil ranked 4th last week in viewer demand among all digital originals in the US across all streaming platforms. Netflix, Hulu, Amazon Prime, all of them. Demand was only surpassed by 3 shows, which were Narcos, The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, and Stranger Things, which are all Netflix originals, during the week ending December 1st. The data measures desire, engagement, and viewership. And last week, I briefly mentioned the canceling of Daredevil, but I didn't delve too deep into it, mainly because there wasn't a whole lot of information released along with the cancellation. There was a lot of theories, a lot of rumors being thrown around, and it was all 100% speculation. But we now have a little bit of factual information. Daredevil finished the month of November with close to 30 million demand expressions. It finished ahead of Hulu's The Handmaid's Tale, as well as The Last Kingdom, House of Cards, and Orange is the New Black. Season 3 of Daredevil had beaming reviews, but the judgments being made at Netflix were more corporate and not creative. Even though Netflix paid for the production of their Marvel shows, it had no ownership stake in the IPs. It was fine and dandy until Disney announced that the launch of Disney Plus for next year, which is set to rival Netflix and Hulu and Amazon Prime. Disney has made it clear that the Daredevil show will continue on, but that none of the canceled shows from Netflix will end up on Disney Plus. I kind of briefly discussed it last week, but my theory is that it will continue on either Hulu or have a soft reboot within the MCU for a future phase of movies, because there's such a rich history with Daredevil. I don't see that show just going away. I don't see him just not doing something with it. So I foresee it being rebooted, or continuing rather, on Hulu, since Disney now owns that section of Fox. So they now own stake in Hulu. So I foresee the show continuing on Hulu, or, like I said, a soft reboot within the MCU. So essentially toning down Daredevil to fit within the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which that's also another huge possibility. Speaking of comics, Marvel announced via the official Star Wars website that Vader Dark Visions, a new miniseries that will launch in March. That's just 2 months after Chuck Wendig's Shadow of Vader was originally set to debut. Instead, days after its announcement in October, Marvel fired Wendig, which he cites that it was due over the publisher not liking his political commentary on social media. Vader Dark Visions is written by Dennis Hopeless, who wrote Jean Grey, and art from Paolo Villanelli. Dark Visions was pitched as an anthology series that showcases Vader as a figure of terror, power, and even hope, through the eyes of various people around him, which sounds awfully familiar to Shadow of Vader. If you remember back in my New York Comic Con 2018 episode, Check it out if you haven't already. But I described that series as a compilation of stories presented by different characters, all about their run-ins with the infamous Darth Vader. It's difficult to say whether